Welcome to Edinboro, Pennsylvania. Located in the center of Washington Township, surrounding the beautiful shores of Edinboro Lake, this town is filled with rich history and local pride. Join us as residents show and tell everything that makes their community a great hometown.
Hi, my name is Fritz Kurtze, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the beauty of Edinboro and my great-grandfather's impact on this town back in the early 20s. He had a farm which encompassed almost 1,000 acres called the Edinboro Lake Farms, which at the time, I'm a little foggy on the dates, but I'm thinking it was the early 20s, 1920, 1918, 19, around in there. He was what I call a gentleman farmer. He was a businessman in Erie and was involved in quite a few businesses, and I think the Edinboro Lake farm was his escape. At the time, the Edinboro Lake farm was the largest dairy farm in the tri-state area. It was envied by a lot of other farmers because the barn itself was massive, and it had, I remember Dad saying, concrete floors, which was state-of-the-art back in the 1918, 1920. The property, from what my dad told me, started Crane Road in 99, south, both sides of 99, to almost the cemetery right by the edge of the lake. I believe about in the early 50s, Sox Harrison approached, actually it would be my grandfather at that time, and wanted to start a summer camp for kids using Edinboro Lake and Greenpoint, which was a spit on the property, and he called it Camp Sunset. Sunset Camp was in effect, I'm not sure how long, but it was a well-run organization. I do remember the cabins were named after the planets, but he did build a tunnel underneath 99 to connect the campgrounds to Greenpoint, which is where they did all their swimming and canoeing and all the stuff, which was really kind of interesting, but I think that tunnel's been filled in since then.
My name is Marilyn Free. I am a lifelong resident of Washington Township and have grown up watching the changes and felt that no article about Edinboro would be complete without some reference to the agricultural background and all the barns that dotted the countryside and are rapidly disappearing. I chose different barns throughout the area because they were sort of a broad representation of our farming community and of barns. Each one has a very different background than the other. The majority of them were indeed working farms in the past. There are not a lot of working farms left in the area. Well, the Walker Farm has been around for a good many years. It was built in 1884. It has been well maintained, and it has been used all those years. For a long time, they were a dairy farm, and then as the agricultural community in this area changed, many people remember the farm as being the John Deere sales in Edinboro. And they had horses throughout a good many years. And currently they raise a lot of corn, acres and acres of corn for sale. The Showman Farm, the barn was built about 1857, and it's actually 3 barns that were put together. It has been a dairy farm for a good many years. It has been a 3-4 generation farm, and it is currently being used as a cheese factory and main sales place. The Lehan Farm is located on Kinner Hill Road and was built around 1950. It was used several years thereafter for milking and housing dairy cattle, and probably around the 70s, as the owners got elderly and were no longer able to use it as a dairy barn, it became farm equipment storage. And the Schur's Dairy Farm was located just off of Route 99 on Kinner Hill Road, and for many years had the dairy sales in the creamery, which was located between the house and the barn. It has been maintained throughout the years and is still being used for storage and other things. A very nice barn specimen of years gone by. The Reynolds is not actually a farm, but the barn is located here in the Boro. It is one of the few remaining ones that housed horse and buggy years ago that is still standing and is being used as a garage. I did mention earlier that each home in Edinboro, basically in years past, had one of those little barns to house their horses and buggies, and often maybe a cow and some chickens, and it was not the town atmosphere that we have today. The building that houses the Coldwell real estate sales and the community library and another concern for many, many years was Culbertson stables that literally housed horses. The building you see today is basically the building as it was many, many years ago. And people who really didn't know too much about Edinboro did indeed know about Culbertson stables and their fine horses.
My name is Janet Woods, and I'm doing a story on making maple syrup in Edinboro. Pennsylvania is named Pennsylvania for the Latin Sylvania, which means forest. And when William Penn named Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, he did so because of the spectacular maple trees that are all through the state of Pennsylvania. When people talk about New England and eastern United States and how beautiful it is in the fall, we can credit William Penn with naming Pennsylvania Penn's Forest or Penn's Woods because of the spectacular beauty of the red and yellow and orange maple trees. And they are what give us pure maple syrup. Pure maple syrup has been made since people inhabited Edinboro and northwest Pennsylvania. Native Americans made syrup first, and then as the colonists came here, they would clear fields, they would clear a forest, and they would make sawmills, and they would develop sawmill runs around creeks. They would clear a field and then be able to plant crops, build a small cabin here. Throughout generations, people have made maple syrup in Edinboro. The colonists made syrup at Hurry Hill in 1846, and they've been making maple syrup in our area here in Edinboro in southern Erie County since then. Many dairy farmers made maple syrup from the 1900s through the 1950s and 60s and 70s. They needed something to do during this period of time between winter and spring, and many of the improvements in the maple syrup industry were made by dairy farmers. For example, many people now use vacuum pumps and tubing to bring the syrup from the tree to the sugar house. Well, they got their vacuum pumps from their milk houses, and they would use filtering systems, and they would maybe use a milk can or something to filter the maple syrup and take out the nite or the sugar sand, which is the sugar sand that you find, which is the minerals you find in the bottom of your tea kettle. We find that in syrup because syrup is made from maple sap, which is mostly water and 2% sugar. And so farmers would make maple syrup during that period of time. And today we find that there are producers of maple syrup, but there are many more hobbyists who make maple syrup. 90% of all the syrup that is made in the United States, 90% of all the producers are hobbyists with under 100 taps. Yes, there are many producers with 5,000, 10,000 taps who produce maple syrup, but most of the people who make maple syrup are those who make it in their backyard for their own consumption. Of course, there is a local food movement that plays an integral part in making maple syrup, as well as a nutritional benefit. The more we study maple syrup, the more we realize that it's a natural product, that is a product that is nutritionally beneficial with all the minerals and vitamins and nutrients that is good for us. And so a lot of people make their own maple syrup. It never surprises me when someone comes up and says, "Try my maple syrup."
Hi, I'm Michael Hall, and today I'd like to talk to you about author Virginia Sorenson. I lived here in the 1950s, and so did Mrs. Sorenson. She is famous because she wrote a book called Miracles on Maple Hill that is about Edinboro, based on people who lived in this town. And because my mother was the editor of the Edinboro Independent, a weekly in Edinboro, I got to know her, meet her, and she became quite an influential person in my life as well as in this town. My mother was the editor of the weekly Edinboro Independent, and she knew Mrs. Sorenson because she interviewed her many times, wrote articles about her books, about the publication of 5 books that were published during Virginia's living here in Edinboro. And I got to meet her through my mother, which became a very important part of my growing up. I was always interested in theater, and having a mother who knew a published author, and then soon a Newbery Medal Award-winning author for Miracles on Maple Hill, became a very important part of my growing up. When Virginia lived here, she lived on Meadville Street, right opposite the college, which was then called Edinboro State Teachers College. She had 5 books published, beginning with a children's book called Curious Missy, and then a rather famous novel based on Mormon life called Many Heavens. Then Plain Girl, about an Amish family living in this area. Then the very, very popular Miracles on Maple Hill, again based on Edinboro characters. Finally, a book, again Mormon-based, called Kingdom Come. So her life here in Edinboro was a very exciting one because 5 major published books happened during that time. A marker was just put up and dedicated last June of, I guess that was 2015, and the marker says Miracles on Maple Hill, and it talks about Mrs. Sorenson living here, writing about Edinboro and about Edinboro people, and it is now right in front of the Edinboro Library. So when you come to this town, you realize, oh, I'm coming into a town that had a very famous award-winning author, and you have the ability then to go to the Hurry Hill Maple Hill Museum, visit a special room that has articles about Mrs. Sorenson and pictures and all things about the book. So it's an influential children's book, and when it wins a Newbery, that means thousands of children get to read it. With a book like Miracles on Maple Hill about this town, our town, you have an immediate reason to go visit, because now you know, oh, somebody really made quite a career living here, and she really wrote about what it was like to live in Edinboro and work in Edinboro during a specific time in the 50s. And so you have a feeling of history. You have a chance to go to see the Historical Society's museum, the Doucet House, which has done specials on Mrs. Sorenson. and you just have a whole cultural and literary experience while you're here.
Hello, my name is Alan Montgomery, and I'm going to talk about why I decided to retire in Edinboro, Pennsylvania. One of the things we liked about Edinboro was the small town atmosphere. The people in Edinboro were very friendly and very helpful. There were a lot of programs that were going on in the community. Goodell Gardens is in the area. They have many cultural and agricultural programs during the summer, music programs. There's an arts and music festival in Edinboro. Kathy and I had sponsored for about 4 years the Maple Festival in Edinboro, which was a big community project. We moved to Edinboro also because it had a university here. The university has a lot of programs that have public activity involved with it. The one that we're probably most involved with is the Scottish Festival and the Highland Games. I'm a regional representative for Clan Montgomery Society International, so we're heavily into the Scottish background. There are many activities for kids at the university. There are public programs. Sporting activities are in addition to the community activity. When we first moved to Edinboro, I stood out on the back porch one October evening on a Friday, and I could hear the bagpipes from the homecoming filtering over town. So I thought, well, this is it with the Scottish background, and I hear the bagpipes where I'm living in Edinboro, named after Edinboro in Scotland. That was a pretty good combination. We like the water in Edinboro because it has a sort of restorative quality to it. It has a calming effect on a person. Frequently we'll be looking out the kitchen window at the water and say, it's just wonderful to see it, whether it's frozen over like it is right now in the wintertime, whether the migratory ducks are now starting to come through. In fact, yesterday morning, Kathy saw the first of what we call diving ducks. All the ducks in Edinboro are dabbling ducks or tip-up ducks. But the migratory ducks, buffleheads, mergansers, almost all the ones that come through are diving ducks and eat underwater. So that's a good sign of when the migration is starting, when you start to see those kinds of birds come through. We have, when our children come and bring the grandchildren, we have a canoe. It's great fun to let them get out and paddle around. I do some fishing. We see a lot of fishing boats, bass boats floating by on the river. And kayaking is now very popular, so we see lots of kayakers. Well, one of the fourth reason that we selected Edinboro is because of the snow. My wife is not so anxious about snow, but she said as long as I can get her where she wants to go. And when you're retired, you don't have to go out and go to work every day at 8 o'clock. So if it's really bad, you can stay home and build a fire in a fireplace. There are two things about snow that are really nice. One is if I go out in the evening and we're having a wonderful snowfall, it's a muffled, quiet sound. Cars will go down the street and you can barely hear them. The reason of that is that snow absorbs the sound in the air, and it's just quiet and calming. The other morning I went out when it was really cold and the ground looked like it was just covered with diamonds. The snow was just sparkling in the early morning, late February sun.
I'm Amber Wellington, and I'm here to talk about Goodell Gardens and Homestead. The story of Goodell Gardens starts actually in 1832 when Leighton Goodell came to Edinboro. That was before the borough was actually incorporated, and he was a founding member of the Edinboro Council, which is really interesting that the name Goodell sort of goes back as far as the borough of Edinboro does. He had several children, one of which was George Goodell. And George Goodell was the first person to buy the property that is today known as Goodell Gardens and Homestead. George's son Todd was the first one to live there, and his daughters Carrie and Margaret Goodell were the people who actually gave their land and a small endowment fund to a community to make what is now Goodell Gardens and Homestead. In the early 1970s, Carrie and Margaret Goodell realized that they didn't have any heirs to leave their estate to, so rather than having it subdivided into a housing development, they really chose to make Goodell Gardens, their family farm, a place where people would learn about plants and the relationship between plants and humanity. So they left a small endowment fund in their 78-acre farm, which we just refer to as 80 acres to make it easier, to become a place for that to happen. And we're really lucky that they did that, because now we have this amazing sort of baby botanical garden and community event space. So later on in the lives of the Goodell sisters, Carrie was still surviving. Her sister had already passed away in 1997, but Carrie, who actually had the most love for gardening, she was working with a group of folks from the Erie Community Foundation and other people from Edinboro to sort of form the idea of what was going to happen on their land. When Carrie passed away in 2001, the first board of directors was formed, and that was to sort of get the idea of what Goodell Gardens was going to be at the time. They called it the Goodell Project. They really weren't sure how to sustainably make the sisters' wishes come true. And eventually they all settled on the idea of a botanical garden, an arboreta, and in 2003, Goodell Gardens was first opened to the public. And of course, it was much different then than it is now, but that was the first time that the public really was able to come in and see the plants that had always been behind a chain link fence. In the last decade, since 2005, we saw fewer than 1,000 visitors, and in 2015 we saw nearly 18,000 visitors. So that's really some tremendous growth for a nonprofit of our size and of our age. We've gone from having just a few classes about composting in Carrie's cabin to having a full schedule of events. We have classes for preschoolers. We have classes for kids that are in grades K through 3 now. We're working on adding additional older classes now too. We have a wide variety of talks about gardening topics for adults, and we have added a full range of cultural events as well, including concerts for children, concerts for general public, a festival at the end of the year, the Homegrown Harvest Festival, and Edinboro's only farmers market, which is a great nod to our agricultural heritage. It also provides a little bit of outreach for our agricultural community in that it gives them a venue and a way to reach the public, and it gives the public a place to do all of their shopping to get their agricultural products in one place. Now today we have just about 10 acres of land developed of that 80 acres, but we do have a master site plan that was put together by a landscape design firm in 2004, and it actually covers hopefully what we'll be able to do with the entire 80 acres of land. So we really not only have sort of become this significant cultural asset in the community, but we're also working to grow into the future. And we're so lucky that the Goodell sisters gave us this beautiful gift here at our community. And our staff and our membership, and especially the community, are just doing the very best we can to be good stewards of that gift.
Hi, my name is Greg Lessig. What I'd like to talk about today is Edinboro and why it is important as a community in Erie County. I came in 1965. I was elected to Borough Council in 1972. In 1974, at a council meeting above what is now the tattoo parlor, which was the old Borough building, it was raining. Oh, a bad and stormy night, I guess you could say. And the rainwater was coming through the roof when we decided to vote on whether or not to build a new building. And the vote was 6-1. In 1974, we broke ground on that Borough building, which originally is where it is sitting now, was Lou Kunkel's furniture store, and alongside Lou Kunkel's furniture store was Jerry's Market, who at the time had the best rotisserie chickens in the borough. The Borough building then was completed in 1975. In 1975, a Home Rule Study Commission was formed in the borough. Harvey Heath was the chairman of that commission. Carolyn Rhodes is still one of the persons who is still alive, was an original member of that commission. They decided that in looking at various interviews of people at the Borough building to write a home rule charter. That charter was voted on unanimously just about by the people of this community. What it did is it changed the structure of the borough government, and it went to, in effect, a council manager plan, and by and large, it is still in existence today. The other aspect of that was the fact that the new borough building provided a tremendous opportunity for various groups to utilize it. The district magistrate's office, for example, was in that borough building, which is now Representative Bizarro's office. Also, it provided a police department in the back of that building, where before, if you look at the old borough building alongside, you will see the letters POL, was where the police department was in 1972. Also, it provided a library downstairs, of which Ann Wozniak was the first volunteer librarian for that. And eventually, of course, the downstairs was utilized by various community groups at the time. The upstairs council chambers was able to seat 160 people. So if there was activities utilizing that council chambers became very important to the people of the community. I think by and large that the diversity within this community is very important in the community itself. The college and the community were growing at the time that we built the borough building, so it was needed. The other aspect basically was that the fire department, which was alongside the old borough building, is now across the street. I think by and large that the relationship of the people in the community with the college and the college with the people in the community is very, very good, and that has developed over a period of time. I believe at one time there used to be some animosity occurring, but that's gone. That's gone. And I think that what we deal with basically is that if we look at the growth of the community and the growth of the college, they coincided with each other and both helped out each other.
My name is Pat Davis, and I'm going to talk about the Edinboro Triathlon. The Edinboro Triathlon started in 1986, almost single-handedly by a local resident. His name is Eugene Hugo Goldthwait, and he put the event together amazingly well, recruiting volunteers, sponsors, and all of that, and he pulled off a wonderful event. I took part for 3 years, and then he said, "Would you consider being race director next year?" And my thought was, what does a race director do? I was a person that just paid your money and went and enjoyed the day. And anyhow, that's history, because I did take over with Hugo and then proceeded for 25 years to continue as the race director for the triathlon. Most recently, it has transitioned to new race management, which I'll talk about in a little while. But yeah, Hugo's the one that started it all. This is a swim, bike, run event, and it's, again, been going on since 1986, and this will be the 30th annual consecutive Edinboro Triathlon, so this marks a big milestone. Actually, the Edinboro Triathlon now has 2 events: an Olympic distance event, which is 0.6 of a mile swim, a 23.6 mile bike, and a 10K or a 6.2 mile run. Also running simultaneously will be a sprint distance event, and that is shorter, and it's about 0.3 in the water, about a 10-mile bike, and about a 3-mile run. Okay, as far as participation, typically there are a couple hundred entrants. We have had years where we had nearly 500, but the event it sort of comes and goes in terms of numbers, but it is on the increase, and I know the new race organizers are looking for bigger and better event this coming year. Well, events such as this have come and gone in different communities over the years. The Edinboro Triathlon has been able to keep on keeping on for many years, thanks largely to the community and all of the people that not only put up with the event on that day, but also who contribute their time and their effort in volunteering in many different ways. And for that, we thank the community for enabling this event to go on. Always a total nonprofit event. Our goals are basically 3. 1, put on a high-quality, safe, fun event. Number 2, be able to pay the bills. And number 3, to donate what remains. And so over the years, thousands of dollars have gone back to the community by donations to the Edinboro Volunteer Fire Department, who's a huge part of the safety of this event. And also, we have contributed scholarship monies to General McLean High School students, as well as to Edinboro University students. So truly, thousands and thousands of dollars have come back to the community, thanks to the Edinboro Triathlon. With 2016 marking the 30th year for this event, I know the new race organizers have a number of enhancements in mind. One, they're going to sanction it as a nationally recognized event, which we had done years ago, but they're revisiting that, which can only help. They're doing some alterations to the course, and so I'm confident it'll be bigger and better than it's ever been. Again, with 30 years of this event ongoing, and Hugo having started all this years ago, I think it's appropriate and very fitting that Hugo is in training now to compete in the sprint distance of the 2016 Edinboro Triathlon. And for that, we wish him very well. For the future of this event, I feel very confident that it's moving ahead. It's going to become, a long-standing event, I think, long after this year. Brianne Vogan, who is with the university, and Chris Rhodes, who's also with the university, he's a swim coach. They are the two people who are keeping this event going. And for that, everybody thanks them, and I know they're going to do a great job.
My name is Rick Scaletta, and today I'd like to talk about the General McLean School District. The General McLean School District started with a jointure of Edinboro High School and McCain High School in the late 50s. At that time, the General McLean Junior-Senior Joint High School was formed for students in grades 7 through 12. Then later in the 1960s, Edinboro Elementary and McCain Elementary became part of what is now the General McLean School District. The school district encompasses 117 square miles and includes the municipalities of Washington Township, Edinboro Borough, Franklin Township, McCain Township, and McCain Borough. We have 4 schools within the district, 2 elementary schools, one in Edinboro and one in McCain, a middle school, James W. Parker Middle School, which houses students in grades 5 through 8, and General McLean High School, which houses students grades 9 through 12. One of the interesting things about the district is its name. We are the only school district in Pennsylvania named after a person and not a location. If you think about it, all the other school districts are named after the town or the municipality in which they are located. When it came time to form the district, it was important to the people who were in charge at the time that it not be one community, Edinboro, or the other, McCain. And so that's how we came to be named after General John W. McLean. It took our solicitor going to Harrisburg and arguing for our case for that to happen. We enjoy a great deal of community support in the school district, and one example certainly is in our extracurriculars. We still have many people who come to our games and to our concerts whose children have graduated many years ago. There is a high level of support for what we do, and we see that also in things like the ads that businesses will take out in our many programs. I think another thing that has helped this district be successful is the partnerships we've been able to form. One that's very strong and very important is that with the local university, Edinboro University. With them in recent years, we've been able to join together to provide tutoring for our students. We work with their students on an ongoing basis so they get a glimpse of what education is about. We also work together to share some facilities and equipment at times, and also expertise that goes between the university and the school district. I think one of the beautiful things about our community is that resources will be provided for any student that has a need, whether it be a financial need, a medical need, a housing need. When we have a student or family that's in crisis or facing some tough times, we can contact any of a number of churches, civic organizations, individual people who are willing to step forward and provide the resources that that student needs. When you live here and when you work in the school district, you get a sense that there is a strong level of pride in the school district among the community. The people who live here obviously support us with their taxes, but beyond that, they take a great deal of pride in the achievements of the school district. And we hope that we can continue to live up to the high level of expectation that is there now because of our success.
My name is Brian Zimmerman, and I'm here to talk about Edinboro Lake. I'm a member of the Edinboro Lake Watershed Association, and the goal, the mission of the Edinboro Lake Watershed Association is to preserve and protect and restore Edinboro Lake and its watershed. We try to do that primarily through education, but we also have, in addition to our educational mission, we do some projects. Right now we're working on a stormwater improvement project up at General McLean High School. That's going to be a demonstration project to educate the public about things that they could do to help protect the lake. There are a lot of things that even local residents don't know about the lake, and one of them is that it's a natural lake. A lot of people think that it's a human-made lake due to the dam, but the lake's natural. It's one of 8 glacial kettle lakes in northwestern Pennsylvania. It's about 15,000 years old. It's been there for a long time from a human perspective. And it's formed when glaciers that were in this area retreated out, headed north, and as the glacier retreated, a big block of ice fell off the front of the glacier, and where that block of ice sat and melted, left a hole, and that hole is filled with water and is Edinboro Lake. Well, the reason Edinboro is here is because the lake's here. When William Culbertson showed up after he built his house, the first thing he did in 1802 was build a dam, a little bit, not in the location where the current dam is, a little bit closer to the lake, but he built a dam and opened a mill. And so the reason he settled here was because of the lake being here. Prior to William Culbertson, the area around the lake was used quite a bit by Native Americans, and they referred to this area as Canoe. So in the older maps from the 1800s will show it as Canoe Lake. And I've been told it's because there was confusion and people would show up in Edinboro who were looking for Conneaut Lake, which is obviously to the south of us, and so they changed the name to Edinboro Lake. So on. Since then, it's been known as Edinboro Lake. The creek that flows out of the lake is still known as Canoe Creek. The lake is a wonderful ecological treasure. Edinboro Lake was identified as the north end of the lake was identified by the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy as a natural area of global significance. What's known as the Edinboro Lake Fen, which is the wetland at the north end of the lake, contains 23 different plant species that have been identified as rare or endangered, which is more than any of the other small lakes in our region. And so you have this just incredible natural community that has survived at the north end of the lake. And in addition to the plants, it's a great place to birdwatch. If you know where to look, almost any day you'll find a bald eagle on the lake. We have all kinds of migratory waterfowl that come through at different times of the year. When the tundra swans show up, you know it's probably going to snow for the first time. And of course there's fishing and boating, and I like to kayak on the lake. There's actually a unofficial club that goes kayaking on the lake whenever there's a full moon. We go out on kayaks and watch the moon rise over the lake.
I'm Barbara Barron, and I'd like to talk to you or share with you today the beginning of the Lakeside development. Well, it all started at Vonks Point, which is actually now the Edinboro Mall. It's right there situated on the outlet leading out from Edinboro Lake. It's practically surrounded by water. Francis Funk had a farm there, 151 acres, that he purchased in 1841. And people from North Braddock, Pittsburgh asked if they could come up and camp on his land and have their beer parties. So he allowed them, and pretty soon it got to be a regular business. So later on, his son Carson Funk set up a little marina there on 6th End at the corner of Funk's Bridge when the cars were able to come across. Set up a marina, and he built himself a steamboat, and he gave steamboat tours of Edinboro Lake. Carson Funk gave tours of Edinboro Lake, and it was a very busy marina. He used to even go out the outlet and over the lake where 99 is and pick up the trolley car passengers coming in from Erie to give them a steamboat ride on Edinboro Lake. Francis Funk built then, he owned the farmland down along Lakeside Drive, and he built the home for his daughter when she married, and it was a Hanson house, and it was called the Penzie. That was the first home on Lakeside Drive. After that, people from Pittsburgh built small cottages, and I mean really small. One of the first ones was the Duchess. After that, people kind of came up on weekends and stayed in their small cottages. Well, then the second generation of children came along, and they built larger homes. There was a bigger family. Extended families came, so the cottages got somewhat bigger, 2 or 3 bedrooms. When this extended family began to come and the cottages were bigger, 2 or 3 bedroom, another marina was built right there on Lakeside Drive. It was called Canoe Marine. Now Canoe comes from the Indian name, the land of the big snow, which Edinboro really is. There's a picture of the Canoe Marine, and it was painted by Ronnie Bayusik, who's kind of a well-known artist in our Edinboro area. The marina was very active, and these people that were coming up with extended families bought ski boats, water skiing, sailing, fishing, and their own speedboats. Now they get into the third generation of children. They're retiring, they have grandchildren, and now the homes are becoming large, very large retirement homes on the lakefront areas of Edinboro.
My name is Judy Minard, and we're going to talk about my cottage today at Edinboro. I live at Highland Drive in Edinboro, and I'd like to tell you all about it and how much we've loved it over the years. Well, the cottage came to be ours. It was June 1969, and we came up to Edinboro with no intentions of buying a cottage that day. We came up with some friends, and they were looking for a place to live, maybe an apartment or a house. But the gal, Pat Davis, said, well, you know, I think there's some property over in Edinboro. Let's take a look at it. So we drove over, and there we were at Old Camp Cassawaga. Camp Cassawaga is located at probably the northern end of the lake. And we just parked our car and saw this older woman there. She had rolls of paper under her arms, and she was talking to some other people. And we went up to her, and she talked to Pat and Denny for a while, and she looked at my husband and pointed to him and said, what do you do for a living? And he said, I'm an architect. She said, I have just the property for you. We turned around, and we looked at it, and we found our cottage. There it was. What was it? It was a boys' barracks from Camp Cassawaga. It was just a shell of a building rolled on top of a concrete foundation. When we went inside, it was amazing what we saw. I mean, it was a shell of a building. There was no windows, just shutters. Over in the corner was a giant squirrel's nest, and that now is our living room. Okay, there were no steps going downstairs. There was no plumbing. There was no heat, no insulation. So at any rate, we had to figure out how we were ever going to buy anything like this. So my husband and Denny, I can remember them walking along the beach that evening at Presque Isle. We'd had a corn roast up there, and they're talking, trying to figure out how can somebody 24 years old with lots of student loans from college, newly married about a year and a half, how could we afford to do anything like this? Well, they talked about it, and they came up with the idea that why don't we try to renovate this and rent it to college students. At any rate, we signed the papers. Closing was over. We started construction right away. This was in July. By October the 3rd, we had the property ready to be rented to college students. So we rented it to 3 college students who in the meantime had lived in a car waiting to get into our cottage. Okay, they got into the cottage, but we received a phone call about 2 months after our first renters. It was from Mrs. Whipple, the woman who sold us the property, and she said, "Judy, I'm calling to tell you that your boys that you rented the cottage to have all the furniture out in the driveway." I said, being young, naive, "Well, maybe they're cleaning." And she said, "I don't think so, and it's really raining hard." So we found out later that the boys had been riding motorcycles around in the top of the cottage. And so, to make a long story short, they were evicted at their first semester. But that was the beginning of our rental experience, and we've rented from 1969 all the way until 1992. Some of the activities that go on right at the cottage are as soon as the grandchildren get out of the car, they are, in the summertime, they are automatically running down and getting the fishing gear, and they're going out and hunting for worms under all the little stones in the garden, trying to get as many worms as they can. And then they just go down to the lake. And when they were little, they loved to go down to the inlet, and they would fish. And for the grown-ups, it was trying to catch a picture or a video of that first fish. And no matter how old they were, maybe they were only 2 years old, and they got their first sunny or their first bluegill. I just want to thank Edinboro for all the wonderful memories they've given us over the 46 years that we've had our cottage, and thank you for enriching our lives.
My name is Renata, and I'm doing my story on Edinboro Historic Cemeteries. The Edinboro Cemetery is deeply connected to the town of Edinboro because it has all of the founders of the town, starting from Alexander Hamilton and William Culbertson, who founded the town in 1796. When you walk through the old Edinboro Cemetery, you can see many names that would be familiar to someone who's from the town, such as names of buildings on the university campus, like Compton and Reeder. You can also see many names of roads which are in the town, such as Perry Lane and Gibson Lane. Also other roads such as Kinter Hill, Laycock, Lay. I think that finding these names is unique to the history of Edinboro because it shows that this was the burying ground for our first people here, and that it was intentionally chosen by those people. I think the setting also shows that these people really did love the place that they chose to live, as it's nestled right next to the lake, and it represents the atmosphere of the town. There's a great variety of stones within the cemetery in Edinboro, from simple stones to very elaborate ones. There's also many different symbols that you can see exquisitely carved into many of these stones. They range from naturalistic, such as flowers and willows, to large obelisks and monuments. Also, urns show up as an interesting symbol of life. Something that also comes up frequently is epitaphs, which would be small inscriptions describing the lives of the people or their deaths, or small poems or pieces of scripture. We have several very interesting examples within other parts of Erie County and within Washington Township outside of Edinboro. There's a gravestone that shows not only an epitaph, but also a flower carving. This gravestone is interesting because there are 3 of them, and they're each in a different cemetery within Edinboro. And they mark the resting places of 3 girls who had drowned just outside of the town in 1849. The epitaph on their stone is as follows: "Let friends for us no longer sigh, but banished all their fears, for we are raised to God on high, who wiped away our tears. Angels to yonder stream came down, and bore our spirits home, were decked with amaranth crowns around the jasper throne." This gravestone and the epitaph is very important because it shows that the community was remembering 3 girls, Lucinda Phelps, Harriet Strong, and Elizabeth Ashe, who had died tragically in this accident, but their memory lived on not for only the people at the time, but for us now, 166 years later. You can also find, next to many stones within the cemetery, small markers that display veteran status of the people who are buried there. This goes from as far back as the Revolutionary War with William Culbertson, a Fenner of Edinboro, to also World War II, Grand Army of the Republic veterans, and even World War I. As community members, I think it's very important that we take all possible actions to preserve the cemetery as it stands now. This would be through educating each other on the importance of the history within the cemetery and how that helps us to better understand where we came from as citizens of the town of Edinboro.
My name is Don Shores, and we're going to do a brief overview of the history of the Doucet House Museum. The house was built in 1861 by Lewis Culbertson. Lewis Culbertson was a grandson of the first settler and the first surveyor that came here in 1796. It was originally built for a private residence. The original owner's name was Clark, and then it changed owners several times in a very short period of time. The house has been known by several names. The first was the Clark House, and then after that it was known as the McLaury House. It's been called the House on the Hill. A lot of people in town referred to it as the Mansion. Prior to 1933, it was called by the neighbors and the kids in the area the Haunted House. Not that we know of any particular haunting experiences, but probably just because of the appearance of the house and being vacant for so long, it became the Haunted House. And then when the Doucet family moved in 1933, it became known as the Doucet House, and everyone has called it the Doucet House until this time. Amy Doucet was an art teacher and was hired by the Edinboro Normal School to teach art, and he was instrumental in expanding the art department in the state school system, and he was hired by Waldo Bates, that was the head of the art department at that time. And when they moved to Edinboro in 1923, they rented a couple different locations around town, and then this house became available and they moved in 1933. And one of the stories that Forrest Doucet tells about the house is that Cass Haynes, one of the local neighbors, was keeping his pigs in the kitchen. So the first thing they had to do was to shovel out the kitchen and give the kitchen floor a good scrubbing after its previous use. And then they just continued to improve the property throughout, the rest of the time they lived here. And they raised their 7 children here. Amy and Edith Doucet raised 7 children through the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And then in 1974, the house was sold out of the family and had a couple of different owners. Then in 2002, a for sale sign from a realtor appeared in the front yard, and Forrest Duke, his nickname is Duke Doucet, saw the sign, and he approached the Edinboro Area Historical Society to see if they'd want to use the house for a museum and a headquarters, and he would buy it and donate it to the Historical Society, and then he and his brother Edward would fund all operating expenses for 10 years to enable the society to have time to build an endowment to maintain the property. So it became property of the Historical Society in 2002. The Historical Society has continued to try to improve the conditions of the property with painting and all interior work, painting, decorating, and acquisition of period furniture, hopefully local pieces when we are able to get them, and suitable period pieces where local items are not available. But we have furniture from local cabinet maker Nathaniel White, and a lot of household furniture that was owned by local families. And we've improved the outbuildings and installed drainage and repaired the heating system. And we have events here in the summer. We have a blueberry social, and we've had Civil War Day and different things on the property. And the museum is open on Tuesdays from 9 to 12 for anyone that wants to do research in the archives, and we're also open on Saturday from 9 to 12. And we have pretty good records for any genealogists or people doing local history. We have the complete census of the United States here, and we have microfilm copies of all issues of the Edinboro Independent from 1881 until the paper ceased to be published.
My name is Bob Orr. I'm doing my story on Culbertson Hills Golf Resort here in Edinboro. Back in 1929, A.A. Culbertson had a vision of building a 1,000-acre recreation complex on property he had recently acquired to the west of Edinboro. He was the great-grandson of William Culbertson, who, along with Alexander Hamilton, founded the town in 1786. Mr. Culbertson envisioned a golf course surrounded actually by another golf course to complement the horseback riding and stables that were already in existence where the former House of Edinboro used to be, which is now the public library, and to go along with the boys and girls summer camps located to the east of Edinboro Lake and to the west of what is now the golf course. Culbertson employed a gentleman by the name of Tom Bendelow, who is from Scotland and had worked for a man by the name of A.G. Spalding, who owned Spalding Sporting Goods. And he was a renowned golf course architect who built over 700 golf courses throughout the United States in his career. And we believe that Culbertson Hills is the last 18-hole golf course that he did in his career. I should also point out that Mr. Bendelow had not only a quantity of golf courses that he did, but he also did very significant courses such as Medina No. 3 in Chicago, as well as several other golf courses who have played host to more than 20 major championships, including a Ryder Cup. The plans were laid out in 1929, and the course began construction in 1930 and opened July 1st, 1931. Shortly after the golf course was opened, Mr. Ing lost the golf course due to the Great Depression, and a couple brothers by the name of the Ing brothers, Harry and Albert, were now owners of the golf course and owned and operated it through the rest of the Great Depression, through World War II, until 1955. In 1955, the Orr family purchased the golf course from the Ing family, and they continued to operate it until the early 70s. They had grown the golf course to 500 golfing members and over 1,000 social members, and it was a busy, busy place. In fact, in 1967, they built an Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is still in existence today, and owned and operated now by the American Legion. Golf was growing at this time, and with the introduction of the golf cart, as well as televised golf, it was becoming very popular, exposing heroes to the American public, such as Ben Hogan and the new kid on the block, Arnold Palmer. So it was a happening time in golf. In the 70s, the golf course was sold by the Orr family, by our family, and the new owners built the Sheraton Motor Inn, which is no longer in existence today. But during the 70s, they changed it from a private golf course to a public golf course, semi-private public, to allow the public to enjoy all the amenities which Culbertson Hills had to offer. Back in the golf business in 1980, our family went back to work maintaining and upgrading Culbertson Hills. The hotel was still very busy, and at its peak, over 4,000 golfers visited Edinboro yearly and played golf at Culbertson Hills. In June of '93, my brothers Gary and Donald and myself purchased Culbertson Hills from our uncles and parents. And we had worked virtually every part of the golf course business at some point in time during our younger days. So we were well prepared to take over and continue the legacy of Culbertson Hills. Last summer, a young man came into the pro shop with an elderly gentleman who happened to be his great-grandfather. And he wanted to know if he could borrow a cart and take his great-grandfather on a ride around the golf course. And I found out after they had come in that the great-grandfather had spent the summer of 1930 with his horse building Culbertson Hills. And yeah, he was pretty fascinated on what, you know, it had turned out to be from 1930 as I think he was 17, you know, until what it is today. And he had a big smile on his face when he left. That was pretty cool.
My name's Dave Obringer. I've been at the university for 26 years. I'm the university archivist, and I'll be talking about the history of the school. The community is the founding impetus for this school. This was a farming community in 1857. In 1856, they actually put a charter together, and that charter was for Edinboro Academy. So they gathered money, $5, $10 a bunch from all the farmers. They put their money together to build Academy Hall, and the town literally owned the building. They owned the property, and they paid for the teachers and everything. The school was started as a normal school, and a normal school is a teacher education school. It does nothing but train teachers. At the time, you needed at the very early 1800 time, all you needed was a common school education, roughly equivalent to 8th grade. Then you could go to normal school, and after 2 years you could become a certified teacher. Well, that was fine for a long time. Then as time went on, come 1920, the state decided you really should have a college degree in order to teach. So all the state normal schools, which we now know as the state system, became state teachers' colleges. And that was in 1927. So naturally, we continued to grant bachelor's degrees in teaching. We still have a strong teaching program. Then come 1960, the curriculum widened out. This was a very liberal period. We began offering degrees in things other than teaching. So that state college era lasted up until 1983, when we became a state university, which is what we are today. The normal hall was built in two sections. There was an 1875, then there was an 1890 section that most of the pictures are taken of. Everything was in normal hall. All the administration buildings. They had a very large auditorium where the students went every day. The library, luckily, had just moved a few years earlier. And it was a tinderbox, honestly. And so there was an electrical spark up in the attic, up off the 3rd floor. And it just grew and it grew and it grew until the entire place was engulfed in flames. But the thing about the normal hall fire was the way that the students, the faculty, and the townspeople reacted to it. They went inside, they formed a bucket brigade and brought drawers out of files. You know, your student records, your loans, your grades, everything that you need in whatever the university administration needed to function. They brought it all out in this big bucket brigade that everybody pitched in on. The building burned to the ground. The fire company did not have a ladder truck, so they couldn't get up and squirt down into the fire. So they were at a real loss to deal with it. I believe there were some 11 fire companies that came to fight that fire, but they couldn't save it. So today we have a tower, a short tower, but a tower with commemorating where Normal Hall was. But again, it was this, people got together, and our students, this is 1969, when students were sitting in and protesting and doing so many things against administration, and our students went out and helped to save the school. Had those fowls been burned, what do you do? What do you do? What's your grade for that class? I mean, what year are you in? How much money do you owe? You know, it's all gone. You know, I've said repeatedly that the town and the university, they grow hand in hand, and they need to act that way. You know, we don't sit out. We're not an island here in Edinboro. We are part of the community.
My name is Savannah Anderton, and I'm doing my story on Edinboro student life. Ultimately, I chose Edinboro because of its strong foundation in educating educators. And my major is secondary biology education, and both of my parents, my mom and my stepdad, both are Edinboro alumni. They're currently both English teachers at Sagertown, Pennsylvania. And looking at Edinboro's history, I was able to see that it started as a normal school for teachers. It was established in the 1850s, and it has such a strong foundation in teaching teachers that I could not resist. Edinboro is really well known for its OSD programs. OSD stands for Offices for Students with Disabilities. It's had a 40-year commitment to developing that program and really, in my belief, making it one of the best in the nation. So as both a biology student and an education student, I get to work really hand in hand with the professors at this university, and I can say that all of my professors are heavily involved in active research. There's a lot of involvement in that way for students. I'm actually currently involved in a project with one of my education professors. We're looking at how to best educate English language learners and what that would look like in a classroom setting. In the biology department, I know that there's a professor that travels to Africa every summer to do live research. And in all of the other departments on campus, there are students involved in hand-in-hand research with their professors. And then those students also have the opportunity to publish papers. So there are conferences every fall and spring semester where students can present their findings. And it's just a fabulous opportunity to be able to put that on a resume and have that little bit of a leg up when you're looking for a job. So the art and the animation programs in Edinboro are really a hidden gem. When you think Edinboro, particularly if you're a local, you think, oh, that's an education school. But our art programs are phenomenal. We actually have graduates right now that are working in Disney and Pixar and all of the really big name studios. And it's just very impressive. Our art community on campus is really well represented. Edinboro is just so full of wonderful things to do. So in the autumn, we host the Highland Games. And it's just this huge celebration of Edinboro's Scottish heritage. And in that, you know, there are festivals, there's music, there's competitions. If you are bored during the Highland Games, you're doing something wrong. And another wonderful part of the Edinboro tradition is Potterfest. So you know you're in a town of academics when you actively celebrate Harry Potter. And it's like a whole week filled with lectures looking at Harry Potter through a cultural standpoint, through a scientific standpoint. And that's available to all the students and to the community members. There's also like a small festival for it. There's Quidditch games. We have Quidditch teams on campus, and it's really fun. And Edinboro just draws in the community that way too. The university draws in the community that way, along with the students.
My name is Tim Thompson, and my story is on the Edinboro Highland Games. When I first came to Edinboro in 1990, I was expecting a lot of Scottish stuff, and I had just gone to the Ohio Scottish Games and was expecting to, see these things going on here, but it wasn't. So I approached the president and some of the vice presidents and said, do we want to do a Scottish Games? And they said, well, we've already checked into that, and it's going to be too expensive, too frivolous, can't throw money at it, and so forth. So I had a couple of my classes, a graduate class and an undergraduate class in public relations, just create a festival. And as they were planning this festival, a few of the grad students knew some guys in pipe bands up in Erie, so they started to ask them if they wanted to get involved, and before we knew it, it started to take on a Scottish flavor, and then we called it the Spring Highlands Festival. So that's what started back in '93, was that Spring Highlands Festival, and now it's evolved into the Edinboro Highland Games. The Highland Games are many different events going on all at once. So for instance, you have pipe bands who perform and compete. You have Highland dancers who are competing inside of the gym. You have the Scottish heavy athletics, so these big burly athletes who are like flipping the caber toss. That's where they try to flip a tree and get it to lay straight away. And they're throwing stones and hammers and sheaf a bale of hay as high as they can and so forth. So there's also, we have the National Scottish Fiddle Championships as part of the festival, and this year we're going to be starting the National Scottish Harp Championships at the festival as well. And then we have a lot of different vendors, pretty upscale vendors with Celtic goods, glassware, jewelry, clothing, and so forth. Some food vendors. We have American foods, Scottish foods, and ice cream and other goodies. And then we have different competitions for students. The Highland Games have evolved over the years from what started out as about 500 people on a very rainy day, just typhoon-like winds. We built a float for that first festival, a Nessie float, and the winds actually pushed a 15-foot float, very heavy, and the winds pushed Nessie across the grounds. So it was kind of crazy from the start, and you know, we've had weather like that through the years. People say I'm cursed because whenever we plan the Highland Games, you know, it's time to plant your lawn because you can bet on it raining. But it has all evolved very nicely over the years. There's been, you know, what started very small has grown into a wonderful event, and really helps to support and celebrate the Scottish heritage and the traditions of Edinboro, the borough, and the university.
Hello, I'm Ron Sturgia, and I'm going to talk to you today about Edinboro, the town, and Edinboro, the gown. In fall of 1959, I left my hometown Springdale in the Pittsburgh area to come north to Edinboro. Upon arriving at Edinboro State Teachers College, as it was called then, I knew I had made the right decision. It was a beautiful campus, and I did not realize that it was going to become my home. The campus, with its tree-lined areas, blend in so well with the pretty town of Edinboro, with its quaint downtown area, and it's the historic dam with the water flowing over from the outlet of Edinboro Lake, which had 3 beaches at the time and was surrounded by the beautiful rolling farmland of the borough of Edinboro and the Washington Township. But it was more than the beauty. I had competent and caring professors who provided me with the necessary teaching techniques and the course knowledge to earn my graduation gown and enter the field of education confidently. Along the way, I met great students, fellow students, who were my teammates and my classmates. The townspeople were just great. They were warm and caring then as they are now. So Edinboro provided this meaningful experience for me off campus and on campus. The townspeople, they were providing the necessary food, shelter, and clothing that one might expect in the homes away from home. But they did more. A lot of us students needed financial assistance to complete our requirements. They provided those opportunities for jobs. I had 3 such jobs while a student. The first job was with the Borough of Edinboro, some of the time down at the water sewage treatment plant, but most of the time I was a tar and chipper. Now, tar and chipper, two of us students would go and sit atop a pile of gravel in the bed of a dump truck, and the full-timers driving, pulling a tar buggy. We would go to the road area that needed to be improved, and we would get out of the truck with shovels, and the full-timers would put the tar on. We would shovel the gravel, which was called chips, into the gravel and make a nice surface. Then at lunchtime, the borough trucks from wherever area they were working would convene on the old jailhouse. And we had our lunch in the no longer used jail cells, talking to one another through the bars. It was a fun experience and work at the same time. The second job was working right outside of town for Vera and Phyllis Woods at Woods Dairy Farm. Now, I know hard work. I came from Pittsburgh. My dad, my uncles, and my grandfather worked in the mines, and some of the relatives and friends in the mills. Farm work was also hard work, but different. I was a farmhand doing barn chores, hay, straw, and so on and so forth. And then I would grade potatoes that were brought in from the fields. The third job was a lifeguard and swimming instructor at Edinboro Lake. My responsibilities, of course, were to teach swimming lessons, but also to make sure that I was watching all the people in the water, but to make sure that there were no rafts or tubes brought in the swimming area, and to be sure that there was no alcohol in the beach area or in the picnic area. I enjoyed that job so much that upon graduation and away teaching, I came back 2 more summers to be the swimming instructor and lifeguard again while I was doing grad work at now Edinboro State College. So each one of those jobs were so meaningful to me and gave me the experiences that complement my education. In fact, I enjoyed Edinboro so much that after 7 years of teaching and coaching at another small, pretty town, Port Allegheny, my wife and our son and I returned to Edinboro, where our daughter was born, and where I served on the faculty for 31 years. I was so fortunate to do so and to assist students much as I had been helped. The experiences I had were so meaningful and meant so much to me to complement the education that I'm truly proud to call this special place, Edinboro, our home.
My name is Jill Crawford Murphy, and I'm doing my story on the Canoe Club and the Pat Crawford Jukebox. So my dad, Pat Crawford, bought the Canoe Club in 1952 from Lee Reynolds, and he expanded it into a place for boat rentals, boat sales. There was a snack bar with ice cream and food. He also taught water skiing lessons, and it was just a great summer place to hang out. He also had dances there, and the dances became very popular, and they got so big that he needed a bigger space to hold the dances. So that's when he bought the Jukebox on August 1st, 1956, and he bought it. It was owned by Billings, who was the original farmer for all the area, and Billings had sold it to a guy named Woods, and Woods sold it to my dad. Again in 1956. In the winter of 57, my dad put in a wood floor himself, tongue and groove wood floor, and he had his first dances the summer of 1957, and they just took off from there, and the dances lasted through the 60s. The one thing that was neat, though, is that you had to have a card. You had to have a dance card, and you bought it at the beginning of the summer. And you would get so many punches. I think you probably had to get 20 or 30 punches before you get a dance in for free. But it was like maybe a quarter to get into the dances, but you had this card all summer long. And I don't believe there were any kind of theme dances or anything. I think it was just the popular music of the time. Obviously, I'm not old enough to remember those dances, but it was the 50s and 60s, the popular music, and that's it. You had your dance card, and that's how you spent your summer. So the dances lasted through the late 60s. My father closed the Jukebox for a few years, doing some other career changes he had, and then he reopened the Jukebox in, I want to say like 1975, 76, I'm not really sure. But that's the Jukebox of my childhood. That's what I remember. And instead of as many dances, there were a few, but it was mostly, we had pool tables and ping pong tables. He had old antique bowling machines and the pinball machines, and then later on in the 80s, the very modern, stand-up video games and that sort of thing. And that's what I remember as a child. And my dad would open Memorial Day weekend, and he would close Labor Day weekend. He was open all summer long, usually from about 6 o'clock until 11 or midnight, depending on how busy the night was. He would stay open a little bit later. But that's what we remember as kids, growing up and making change for everyone. We sold, pop and snacks and that sort of thing. And my dad would also have his own parties and a lot of political fundraisers. My dad was very politically active, so he would, do some campaign fundraisers and stuff like that. But, that was what we did as kids. In the early 90s, my dad was still open in the summers, and as he got closer to retirement, he did close the Jukebox, so it was probably closed for about 5 or 6 years. And then he passed away in 1999. In the summer of 2000, my sister and brother and I started the daunting task of trying to clean out the barn and make sense of it all, of all the memorabilia that he has in the barn. And that summer of 2000, we rented it out for our first party for really good friends of ours. And since then, we have rented it out every summer for private parties, and like just graduation parties. We've had weddings there, that sort of thing, and that's the business that it is right now. One of the neatest things that happens quite often to us is we'll be at the barn and cleaning or doing whatever work we do, because it is a labor of love for sure, and just random people will just come to the barn, or they'll walk in, or they'll be taking their picture outside. And I just remember one time there was an older couple that was standing outside, and they were taking their picture, and I kind of just walked over and said, "Can I help you?" And they had tears in their eyes, and they just said, "This is where we had our first dance, and this is where we met, and we've been married 40 some years." And so it's just really neat to have people, it's that important to them that, they come back and they want to see the site again where they met. And as, much as I think my dad knew how much fun the kids were having, I don't think he would have ever realized the impact, that it really did have on people, that they really, it left a mark on them and just created these beautiful memories for these people to come back and see that the barn is still there, that we're still taking very good care of it. And they can still come back and get their picture taken and tell their story to us. That's a really neat thing that happens a lot.
I've lived in Edinboro my entire life and have always loved the natural beauty and interesting history of the town and its surroundings.
I would say the lake is the second best thing about Edinboro. The first best thing about Edinboro is Dairy Supreme.
When I was a kid, the most attractive thing about Edinboro was the lake. And then I learned that Lakeside was a place that had lots of cottages, and people from Pittsburgh would come up in the summertime and rent these cottages. Well, I was always an entrepreneur as a child, so I conned my parents into having a little garden. Then they raised lettuce and radishes and carrots. So I would pick them and wash them off, get them on my bicycle and peddle them to all those Pittsburgh people in Lakeside. And obviously started a entrepreneurial business right there, which is silly. But the lake is a great attraction for Edinboro. But I think also because it's got a lot of its historical houses and buildings are still here. And there's a kind of cultural charm about this little town.
My favorite part of Edinboro and living in Edinboro is the small town atmosphere and knowing everyone.
I think what I like best about Edinboro is the changing of the seasons.
My favorite thing about living in Edinboro are the 4 seasons. June and September, low humidity, 70 degrees. You can't beat it.
My favorite thing about Edinboro is the summers. Having lived here for over a decade and been a member of the community for that time, I It almost feels magical here during the summer. The first summer I was here all year round in Edinboro, not just here during the semesters. I really discovered this beauty of the nature in Edinboro, and just the way the community sort of comes together. The snowbirds all come back, and traffic isn't quite as crazy, which is important, and there's just so much going on, and it really feels like a treasure.
I love the ever-changing views. I've seen hot air balloons and seaplanes and herons and beavers, and my view is ever-changing, and I see the sunrise from my bedroom window, and I don't want to live anywhere else.
What do I like about Edinboro? I like the weather. I like cold weather. I've never been a hot weather person, so Edinboro's a good place to be. I like the people. I like the fact I've lived in small towns most of my life, and I like being around the people. I like being able to walk wherever I want to go. So it's just been a very nice town. It's a nice town to bring your family up in.
I find Edinboro a wonderful place, and I also raised 5 kids here, and now grandchildren. I don't think you can beat it.
My favorite thing about Edinboro is family. It's the fact that I'm here with my husband, my kids are here, my parents have a house here that they come to on the weekends, my kids get to grow up with their grandparents in their life. My husband's family's only an hour away, so they get to spend time with their other set of grandparents. So for me, Edinboro, my favorite part about Edinboro is my family.
So I grew up in Edinboro. We grew up right next to the Jukebox in the house that my parents built. And I lived there for 27 years. And I moved, when I got married, and I only live about 20 minutes away from Edinboro. But, when I come back here, which is often, obviously probably at least once a week, and in the summer we stay out here quite a bit. This is still my home, and this is, where my heart is. And, especially the lake and just the surrounding community, the people. This is where our roots are. This is a place that is very sacred and special to me. And, it's just very special to my whole family. And we all come back here. 4th of July is a big holiday for us, and that's when we all come back, because we all want to just have that great summer at Edinboro Lake again, and we do every year. It's just wonderful.
Okay, I came out to the Edinboro area 38 years ago when it was time for my oldest child to start kindergarten. The education system out here has always been very renowned. We have the best as far as teachers and schools in this area. I never ever considered leaving even after they've all grown. My grandchildren are now going through these schools, and it's that kind of community that when you come and you belong, you can't imagine life anywhere else. It's a great place to be, great place to raise your children. And I've watched them go off and come back now to raise theirs. So it is the best of places to live.
I love Edinboro's diversification. I love the fact that even in the wintertime, you can get around in this community. The borough takes care of its streets. I am now a member of the Municipal Authority and also the Water Authority, having served 20 years on Borough Council. And from 1993 to the present, I am now on those 2 authorities. But it's the fact that every vote that was taken on Borough Council when I was on council was a vote on the basis of what was best for the community. There was no partisanship related to it. So whether you were Republican or Democrat, you voted on the basis of what was best for the community.
My favorite thing about Edinboro is this, and this is really interesting, in that I worked out here in this community my entire career. Never moved here, but having done that, I've seen what a wonderful community is, and so probably the best thing is the fact that I now live here.
I'd say the number one thing I love about Edinboro, first and foremost, is the people. I'd say a close second would have to be the Snickers flurries at the Dairy Supreme.
There's a lot of nice people. It's something that happens with a small town. And I think that with those people, you find all kinds of fun events. And one of my favorites is really the Downtown Edinboro Art and Music Festival that they do every spring, every May. Just wonderful music that comes through and just a good time.
We have found out that there's a great community support. If you need help, the people are there. 2 years ago, my wife and I had some health issues at the same time. People responded with food, with driving us places where we needed to go because there was a time when neither of us could drive. When we had the Maple Festival a few years ago, people came out of the woodwork to respond and volunteer for that program. So it's a very caring community. The people are very nice, they're laid back. It's an agricultural community. The people are practical. And it's just a very nice place to live, and it's a very nice place to retire to.
The thing that impresses me most about this community is the generosity. And it starts with the way they contributed money to start this school. And it continued as the Board of Trustees involved in the school, and they were generous with their time. I'm very involved with the Edinboro Area Historical Society, and I can tell you that they have been very generous in adopting us and helping us to survive. This house that we are currently doing the interview in is the Edinboro Area Historical Society's house, and it was all made possible because of the generosity of the people that live here. They are an incredibly generous group of people.
I love Edinboro. It kind of reminds me of the theme song of Cheers. If you want to go where everybody knows your name and everybody enjoys the same activities and they all share in your life, it's very rich.
Our Town Stories from Edinboro is brought to you in part by Edinboro University of Pennsylvania. Founded in 1857 as a private training school for teachers, today Edinboro's campus community pursues scholarship in 145 areas of academic study on a 585-acre campus that includes open fields, wooded areas, and its own 5-acre lake. Edinboro University scholars receive the personalized attention and small class sizes necessary to ensure they achieve their goals and are guided by an internationally recognized faculty who prepare them for opportunities upon graduation and throughout their careers. Information is available at edinboro.edu. The Seasons Inn at Nick's Place. The Seasons Inn, offering 12 seasonally themed rooms, each with a private bath, and deluxe continental breakfast daily, is ideal for business travel, romantic getaways, or family get-togethers. The Seasons Inn is located within minutes of Edinboro on Route 99. Reservation information is available at 814-734-5098, extension 221, or online at nicksplaceandco.com. Our Town Stories from Edinboro is also brought to you in part by Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority, Edinboro Lake Watershed Association, Cunningham Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, Charlie's Pub and Eatery, Fat Willie's Wing House, Goodell Gardens and Homestead, and by viewers like you. Thank you.